This is Glenn Hodges. Welcome to Chattanooga Self Improvement Meetup, a mastermind group where we listen, learn, ask questions, and comment in an effort to help make each other the best version of ourselves, thus helping to make the world a better place in which to live. Our guest speaker today is our own Kelly Knowles. She earned her BBA and MBA from MTSU. She's a full-time senior trainer at Bass, Berry & Sims, as well as an adjunct instructor at MTSU. She has a coaching business called Kelly K Consulting, where she focuses on helping individuals and teams discover, develop, and dig into their innate potential. Kelly is always searching for a better way to do things. Now, let's turn it over to Kelly and learn about lifelong learning and your personality, why it matters. It's all yours, Kelly.
Good morning, Glenn. Thank you so much. I am going to start my PowerPoint here. And does everyone see that okay and hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am super excited to be here this morning, and I'll just kind of try to keep an eye on the chat to see if there's anything. I am always open to interaction. Nobody wants death by PowerPoint, certainly early in the morning. And I really want to, again, thank Glenn for allowing me to speak. Bob Ritchie originally told me about this group, and so I want to give my thanks to Bob as well. I don't know if you all have looked at the description of this group on the meetup, but I wanted to take a few kind of quotes from it because it so helped to define what made this group so appealing to me and why I had such a desire to give back and share with you all. And take a look at this. It says, consistently striving to be the best they can be in their professional and personal life. And then there's some books listed. So now I have even more books on my to-read list as a result of taking a look at this description. But this is so good because it indicates so much of what this group is about. So I wanted to introduce that if you hadn't taken a look at it in a while. And just to get you thinking this morning, because some of us are still on our first cup of coffee, I want to toss out a couple of questions. And again, I'm totally open to being interrupted and feedback as we go along. Here's the first one. What are you reading right now? And I add to that kind of a sub-question on purpose. In what format? So would a couple of people be willing to share very briefly what you're reading right now? And then what I mean by what format, are you audio? Are you Kindle? Is it hardback? You dare not read without your highlighter and pretty markers. What comes to your mind when I ask you that question?
I'll answer, Kelly.
Okay.
I am reading Eric Larson's book about the first FDR's first ambassador to Germany when Hitler was coming into power. I'm reading that on Kindle, and I'm reading Madeleine Albright's book on fascism that came out a couple of years ago. And that's in paper, hardback. Both from the library, though, because I'm cheap with my reading material, even though I'm an obsessive reader.
Thank you, Becky. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm reading a book called The Way to Mastery, and I'm reading it every day. It's a beautiful book, and it really talks about how lots of different things about how important coming home is, how important meditation, how important knowing the connection with the divine. I read it in the book form. I have the audio form, but I do the book form, and I have a pencil, and I do the underlining, and then I go back and read the underlining, and it just really feels like it brings it into my body.
Ooh, Molly, thank you. And here's your second question, because this is the one that I really wanted to customize this talk with you all today to you all, because you're accomplished, you're seasoned. So here's a question for you. How do you react? And I put the word honestly in there. So we're not doing the shaming of, well, I should. We're just going to be honest today. How do you react to those who are not consistently striving to continually learn and improve? Any thoughts?
Well, I generally act in a very positive manner toward those people when I see the potential there. But when I really get irritated is after I sometimes offer assistance they didn't ask for, and they seem somewhat receptive, but yet they're just giving it lip service. Those are the people I just want to pick up and shake.
Glenn, thank you. I appreciate your transparency. This has been a hard lesson for me because I've had to learn that this is not something that everyone thinks about. It is not part of many people's lives. And I'm going to share a little bit of story to get us started before we drill into the color code, because I want us to warm up and really get our thinking going, because the focus is on you all, not me. That being said, I'll be a big hypocrite and tell you a little bit about me real quick. So we originally are from Illinois. We moved to Tennessee when I was 7. I have a younger brother who is so indoctrinated to the Chattanooga world that if you ask him, where were you born? He will look you dead in the eye and he will say, Erlanger Hospital. Many of us know the truth. But we did move to Tennessee when I was a little girl. My mother is Mavis Knowles, and she has been at the local Ace Hardwares throughout Tennessee and Georgia for over 40 years. She actually started there when I was 10. So whether you're in the North Georgia area or throughout the Chattanooga area, you may have seen Mavis in many of those stores. She is still working part-time. They have been lovely. And of course, if you are familiar with the Ace Hardware, they've been rebranded to Elders Hardware, which I absolutely love. I had the honor of meeting Elder Glenn when I was a little girl. And I remember thinking, just seemed like a statesman, and just really set a legacy for that organization. And his son has grown it. I'm just in awe of his son's ability to do business. We're going to talk a little bit about my dad. I'm going to do my best not to get emotional. My father was a welder. He actually learned that trade in the Navy. And when I was in junior high, or middle school as it's called now, he went into the electrical apprenticeship program with the IBEW there in Chattanooga. Now, y'all, he did this midlife with 2 teenagers. My father had not gone past 9th grade. He ended up getting his GED later. And he found himself with a 2-hour commute on both ends. He was actually working at the Bellefonte nuclear plant when he began this program. So in addition to a full 8+ hour day, he was a very involved father. He also had a 4 hours a day where he was on the road. And then he added into it this apprenticeship program. I will say that when he graduated 4 years later, we all graduated. So he demonstrated a life of continuously learning. He was always about doing better. He, very crudely put, he did not believe in half-assing anything, and he was very much about expressing that in even more direct ways than I just did. But one of the things that I will say is I cannot remember a time also when I didn't see him reading. So I pulled up this classic photograph of my father. This is back in the 70s. It is so classic of that era. You see the covers, the arm covers on the sofa, and the cigarette in the ashtray, and the big Kmart ad, and his hair slicked back. And this is the stance that I remember my father in. It's so interesting to me how he grew up so working class, very poor. His mother was a widow by the time he was 14 with 10 children. And, excuse me, but there was that continual emphasis of learning and doing better. I'm so grateful for that. Not everyone gets that type of background. A little bit about me. I was actually told in high school that I was not smart enough to go to college. I took an early pre-SAT, and the guidance counselor at the high school in the Hickson area sat me down and they said, "You're not planning on going to college, are you?" And I just looked at her and I said, "Well, of course I am." And she said, "Well, you're not smart enough." And that is one of the things that I often talk about. I'm so glad I didn't listen. I did go on to Middle Tennessee and I graduated with honors. It was not easy. I had to work at it, But I went, and I love telling that story, especially for people who come from backgrounds like I did, where college wasn't a norm. My parents had a full expectation that I would go to college, but yet their own personal knowledge of what it would take, how to get in, and so on was not there. I remember my mom saying, "You're going to have to figure this out for yourself. I don't know anything about entrance exams. I don't know anything about college applications. I don't know any of this. We will write the check. But that you'll figure it out. You're going to have to figure this out for yourself." As we move forward into a little timeline, I did have a professional organizing business back in the 90s. It's interesting how much that has helped me in my coaching today. I see so many connections to how people organize their space, and it is very relevant in my coaching. I've also been a full-time college professor, and that shifted when I married in my mid-30s. Within 3 years, my husband and I were not only raising his youngest stepdaughter, he had full-time custody, we were also raising his oldest daughter's children. And so within 3 years of marriage in my mid-30s, I went from a very career-oriented professional to a nana. And we raised those boys for 7 years. The mother moved back to the Middle Tennessee area after being gone for 7 years with a new spouse, 2 more children, and decided that she wanted those 2 children back as well. So you can imagine we had some really difficult times. It was a huge, huge time of learning for me, especially when those boys came to live with us. One was 20 months old. The other had just turned 3. So instant parenthood, instant mommyhood, and that was quite a radical change from being a college professor and having a full-time career orientation. So I think about my life today as a tapestry of all of these experiences, and I really believe it has set me up for being the trainer that I am at a law firm, because I'm working with people at all levels, whether they are a senior partner at the firm or they work in our mail area. It is my job to onboard them, to train them, to continuously teach them the technology. And I've been so excited that we have introduced for our staff more business skills, soft skills is what some people call it. So these background experiences I'm very thankful for. I do a speech in Toastmasters Bob is familiar with, and I call it, "We Can Laugh About It Now." And I'm sure all of us can look back at our lives at these very difficult times. And sometimes it takes a while to find the humor. But that speech did get me second place in a contest I'm still gunning for first. That common theme, by the way, in that tapestry is lifelong learning. And that's why I wanted to take a moment to introduce a little bit about my background. So we're going to get out of that, and I'm going to toss it back to you. I want the focus to be on you. What is your approach to learning? Can personality play a part? So as we enter quarter 4 of 2020, I can't believe it. I've been very thankful to read all of Becky's posts on LinkedIn. If you're not following those posts, I'm amazed at her practical business advice. What would you personally say right now about the status of your goals? Are you striving or stalled? Perfect or pitiful? I know I'm being extreme. On task or tapped out? And then I toss in a little humor. Are you kidding me? Because some people have just been straight up working to survive the year that we've been in. My proposal today is that we take a beginner's mindset. For those of us that are seasoned and we've been around a while and we've learned a lot, we've experienced a lot, we've taught a lot, sometimes going back to that beginner's mindset is difficult. I would offer that I'd love us to sit there in that space today as we look at discovering our driving core motive. So when we think about this, I want to ask a question. I had to go back a while. Do you remember learning how to tie your shoes? Do you remember learning how to tie your shoes? Y'all, I am 51 years old, and I viscerally remember learning how to tie my shoes. And it started out feeling a little bit this way. You see, in the state of Illinois, it was a requirement for you to be able to demonstrate that you knew how to tie your shoes before you could start school. Velcro was not an option. And my mom was a righty and I was a lefty. And I remember this process. Some of the things that I remember was I wanted to go to school. I couldn't wait to go to school. I couldn't wait to learn. I couldn't wait to be around kids. I couldn't wait to do. There's a reason I'm saying those pieces. And I also was very frustrated because I couldn't learn it fast enough. I couldn't learn it fast enough. I did not have patience with my mother nor with myself. And that's why I wanted to bring up a childhood memory. Do you remember learning how to tie your shoes? Anybody?
I remember learning to tie my shoes, and I can relate to that. And before I forget, I muted everyone a while ago because there was a little noise in the background. So you're going to have to unmute yourself to respond. But what made me relate to learning to tie my shoes was that I was reading something about activating other parts of your brain, and that the suggestion was that if you're right-handed, brush your teeth in the morning with your left hand. I've been doing that for a little over 30 days, and I'm getting pretty good at it. So it's a lot like learning to tie your shoes. So unmute if you want to respond to Kelly.
Thank you, Glenn. I love that idea. The reason I toss this out is when we are learning something new, I love this quote. We've got to be polite with ourselves. So many times we are our own worst critic. We get so frustrated with ourselves. And I often tell younger people, new levels, new devils, y'all. When you're going to that next level, when you're learning something new, when you're experiencing something new, it's that politeness with ourselves. And I am not saying I'm any expert at it. Glenn brought something out as well. I wish I understood science better. The field of neuroplasticity fascinates me because it's proving we can change. And I'm like, yes, somebody finally is proving what I've said all along, because I never agreed when I heard someone say, I won't change. I do believe we have a driving core motive, which I'm going to talk about today. But I love this field of neuroplasticity because it offers those thoughts, just like Glenn demonstrated in telling about the toothbrush. And I bet, Glenn, I might be stretching here, it might not have been as tidy of a toothbrushing when you first started. Is that fair?
No, it wasn't. I had toothpaste everywhere. I looked like a clown.
That's awesome. So get you thinking a little bit more. Which of these thoughts sound most familiar? My hope is that you can relate a little bit to at least one of these. But I've got to do this now. Productivity is key. I need to be respected and look good technically. But I don't handle failure well. Everything needs to be perfect. I need to be good. But failure upsets my normally peaceful state, so I'll stick with the status quo. I need to feel good, but I won't look good. And I need other people to think I look good. This is too serious. Can you relate to any of those buts?
You know, if someone else jump in here, but the first thing I think of is really what we're talking about is operating in the comfort zone and learning to get out of the comfort zone. The story's told about a fellow that was just enjoying peacefully drifting down the river in a canoe until he approached a waterfall. So sometimes what we think and perceive to be comfortable can get very uncomfortable. So next time you're questioning whether you should get outside of your comfort zone, maybe you should.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn. The reason I put these butts out is I'm hoping you can relate to at least one of them. Be good, feel good, look good technically, and also be right. There's some pieces in there that are important when we look at the color code in a few moments. And back to what Glenn was saying, a study on human behavior has said often we would rather continue along with something that doesn't work than try something new, but there's that F word in there, but also could fail. Being willing to fail, we could actually achieve more. I bet every single one of you on this call today has that story because of what you've accomplished in life. And that's why I added this third bullet, because what we want to also consider is even if you personally have learned these lessons in life, consider how you might be able to use these lessons and tools to help those who are terrified of failing, paralyzed from taking action. I have two group coaching that I do. One is Next for women in midlife who are ready for their next. And the other one is called Grow, and it's specifically for those people in their 20s and 30s who are looking to grow their mindset and to look at the best way for them to do their growth. With each of these groups, there is a continual common theme, and it is analysis paralysis and perfection and a tremendous fear of failure, a tremendous fear of failure. And so if that has been something you've overcome, Glenn was sharing earlier about starting his business in the 80s and going on vacation and then getting a check, but starting that business with no income at the beginning. Many people, just to hear that story, would find anxiety and stress. Others would be like, yeah, and then what'd you do next? We have so many folks where there is that fear of failure. Fear is prevalent in our society today. So again, that beginner's mindset, if anything's worth doing badly. The expert was once a beginner. I wrote down Molly's mastery book. I'm interested in taking a look at that. And when we think about this, I hate using the word resolutions because 2020 has just kind of tossed us around. Every adjective's been used. I don't have any left. But when we have to pivot, it means looking at something that we haven't done before, And we've all had to pivot this year. If any of you vehemently disagree, yell at me. But I would offer that in some way, we've all had to pivot in some level this year. My husband builds cabinets. He built what you see behind me. I'm very thankful for his skill. And his business, as where he works, hasn't really changed in terms of COVID procedures and so on. So he hasn't had the same impact as some others, but he's had to pivot. He had to pivot when he had to wear a mask to go into the Home Depot. And I will just leave it there as to how he felt about that because I don't want to be incendiary in my comments. But in every way, we've all had to pivot somehow, I would offer. We're going to get into motives because sometimes this understanding our driving core motive is super important. It has been a game changer for me. So driving core motive, moving us into a review of the color code. And the premise is this, we've all seen this graphic, but the premise is your behavior is just that tip of the iceberg. Motive is everything underneath it, And for me, discovering my driving core motive helped me understand my attitude towards learning, my attitudes towards failure, which I have, by the way, renamed trial and error. It also helped me understand why so many times I felt like a fish out of water in different scenarios. I learned about the color code personality profile from a speaker about 4.5 years ago. And I looked at my husband and I said, I'm a red, you're a white, and this explains everything. And we had a good laugh. But what I also liked about it was the most unique personality profile that I had come across because it didn't focus on just behavior. It focused on that innate driving core motive that you're built with. So it was developed by a guy named Taylor Hartman. This has been around 30 plus years. And he was a psychiatrist. What he was trying to do was delineate better a way to help his clients. And it's been rebranded into the People Code. I just felt so driven about this one that I told my husband, I said, I want to get certified in this. It was not sponsored by my organization. This was something that I really felt driven to do personally. And what I love about it is there's a lot of those profiles out there that, kind of crudely put, your average Joe doesn't get. They just don't understand it. They don't know how to relate it. For me, there are so many personality profiles that are incredibly valid. They have all the science behind it. I've had some friends in the academic community just wear me out about the science of color code. What I love about it is the practical application. I use it every day because it's not just about my own personal self-awareness. It's being also aware of how I respond and react to others. And that is what I think is incredibly powerful. So when we take a look at the color code, there's 4 colors. They're not particularly meaningful to a certain extent. It's just an easy way to identify. Now, if you are someone that really goes back into the psychiatric background, you'll see that the 4 is a very common theme for various personality profiles. A red, their driving core motive is power. I like to rename this to action. Reds are your doers. I did a video on my Facebook group the other day and I said, are you a doer? And it was so interesting to read the responses and comments. A blue, their driving core motive is intimacy. Now, too often people think of that from a physical perspective. So what I like to talk about on that is connection. A blue, they want to connect with you. If you have ever been in a meeting and you're like, I can't stand this, I can't take any more small talk, I hate networking, there may be some blue floating in your driving core motive because a blue wants to know you. They want to know what you're about. They want that connection. A white, I married a white, and they are your peacemakers. They are the most accommodating people. They're just going to accept you as you are. They are all about steady state. Now, I will offer a little word of advice. Don't get them mad. I'm just saying you might not want to get a white mad. And then yellow, their driving core motive is fun. Sometimes when people find out they have a large piece of the pie, if you will, that is yellow, they feel bad about themselves. I'm like, no, this is a beautiful thing. Yellows bring optimism, creativity, positivity to the mix. All of these are part of that beautiful tapestry of us as humans. Natural talents. Now, I want to pause here because when we look at personality profiles like this, it doesn't give us permission to say, well, I'm a red, I'm all about power, so deal with it. There is this word called character that comes into play, and character is really important. When we think about natural talents, does that mean that a white couldn't do one thing and a blue couldn't do another? Absolutely not. These are just some potential natural talents for people who have a solid part of this color. So reds, as you would imagine, have some leadership, vision, great ability to provide leadership and vision. Blue, quality and service. I've learned this at the law firm. If I were to look at staff in a law firm, let's take accounting staff, for example, I would bet that the majority of our accounting staff have a large piece of their pie as blue. Why am I saying piece of pie? Because there's very few people that are just all red, all blue. It's a mix. You're an individual. You're innately beautiful and made. So when we think about quality and service, that's a blue. They're going to do things right. They're going to be detail oriented. They're going to focus on process and procedure. Where they have to be careful is in that analysis paralysis, that bent potentially towards perfectionism. White, clarity and tolerance. I'm working from home right now, but in previous, I could come home, spill out this what I thought was an incredibly complex situation with 400 characters and all the emotions and so on. And my husband would literally in 3 bullet points go bam, bam, bam. And I would just sit there and go, how did you do that? They are phenomenally logical, and they have the ability just to provide tremendous clarity to cut through the noise. And they're incredibly tolerant people. They really truly accept you as you are. And then yellow, as I mentioned, great enthusiasm, optimism. We added a yellow I work in the HR department at the law firm. We added a yellow to that department. She's very meticulous. She is excellent at HR. She is completely on point when it comes to the law. But because her driving core motive is yellow, she brings fun. She brings a lightness to our group. She brings an enthusiasm and optimism that has been tremendously welcomed. Before we move on to the how you learn based on these colors, are there any questions or comments? All right. So how you learn, why does this matter? Throw some questions out. You remember at the beginning of our talk today, I asked you, what are you reading and in what format? So a red often will like reading in audio. They want it brief. They love being able to learn on the go, get it. They want fast, and they seek control. A blue loves the books. They want to touch the book, feel the book, open the book. They love to read and study from those physical books. Do you like workbooks? There are people, you give them a workbook, they are in. Oh, I have a workbook, I have the perfect markers for that. I heard someone talk the other day that when they were growing up, their notebook had to match their binder, had to match their markers, and they were all a specific color for a specific subject. I'm curious if any of you all can relate to that. They're analytical, they like the details. When you think about speed, it's a very deliberate speed, and they want control. As a primary red, I get to be really messed up because I have a secondary blue. What I've learned in the training field, and especially when I'm working with managers at the law firm, and we're working with a SME, a subject matter expert, and then it's my job to teach the information to everyone else. I've had to learn that I can't go in and go, all right, here's the plan. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this is going to work out here, and this is going to happen here. If I do that to a real blue, they are going to put up a wall that is almost visible. And I will often hear this, well, I need to think about that, or we need to think about this. And I have lots of questions. Every bit of that is honorable, and I've had to learn to flex my style if I want to accomplish the goals. White. They like audio. They're often very visual. If a white is often introverted, but I guarantee you they're observing everything. They are observing. As a teacher and a trainer, I love to learn the class, to learn the group of adults that I'm working with. And if I can get a white to speak, the wisdom, the information that they offer is incredibly valuable. They're not going to offer it without being asked usually. It's not important for them to give you their opinion all the time. But when you take the time to identify that person and pull that out in a respectful way, it is beyond cool what that person will offer. They like to observe. They're all about timing. You'll notice I put speed deliberate with an asterisk. Try not to speed up a white. They'll slow down on purpose. It is about them. They don't need control, but they refuse to be controlled. So keep that in mind. This affects relationships as well, not only just professional, but also personal. Finally, you're yellow. So yellows love the visual. Keep it positive with the yellow. Keep it positive. Keep it interactive. They need a little bit of structure, but not too much. And again, they like that speed, fast, and they refuse to be controlled. If you've raised children, or you're raising children, or you have grandchildren, or children in your life, this is so powerful. My husband's oldest has 4 children now. The middle one was that kid that was just, everybody loved him. He was likable, he was fun-loving, he was enthusiastic. At almost 15 years old. You can still give him a big hug in front of the whole world. He doesn't care. He's just that kid. I've also learned that if you need to discipline him, if you need to deal with something where his behavior is not where it needs to be, just like any kid, don't do it in public, right? But with him, it's a different approach because a yellow wants to look good. And he was awful during a flag football game one day. I don't know if he was convinced he was Joe Montana. I don't know what was going on with him. He wasn't being a team player. He was being cocky. He was having a tantrum on the field. And I knew that wasn't the time to deal with it. But I thought, when I get him in my car, and we got in the car, and I said, you've always been an amazing team player. I love how you have always encouraged your other teammates and made them feel good about themselves. And I said, and you're so good at being a player. I said, but today you really disappointed me. And it was a much better conversation than had my natural red bent got in the car and just went off. What were you thinking? We've all had those moments, but I made myself stop and pause and think about his personality that day. And the next game, he was a superstar in all the good ways. This has to do with how we deal with our teams, how we deal with our spouses, and so on. How you learn is different than maybe from someone else. So if you're delivering learning, if you're setting up training, or you're just trying to help someone else learn, knowing some of this really can be a powerful, powerful tool. Glenn, I want to honor time. I've got a few more slides. Are we okay on time? And are there any questions or comments?
Oh, we're okay on time. And anyone that wants to jump in when Kelly asks for comments, unmute. I muted everyone because we were having a little background noise earlier. So take it away, Kelly.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Kelly,
Yes.
if I can break in. This is a very good conversation for me. I was born and raised in the education system, but pretty quick off, by second week of second grade, as people know me, I was pretty much butting heads against them. I was actually born on a college campus. And in fact, the hospital I was born in is now a dorm for Purdue University. And then I grew up on the various campuses, Toledo University, and then at Georgia Tech. I pretty much grew up on the Georgia Tech campus. Sorry, Glenn, but
We'll forgive you for mentioning that curse word, bumblebees in Atlanta.
But this is, in fact, I'd like to get together and work with you. Just to shorten the conversation, because I have so much to say, I've done museum displays. And one thing I consider museum displays to be are educational. If they're not providing, even if it's just a perspective, a different perspective on things, because I'm an artist as well. And I find that so much artwork these days is not saying anything. It's just another picture of a flower, another tree. It's just in a different style, but it's there's not much innovation. Where, say, in the 1960s, there wasn't anything that wasn't saying something, no matter what it was. And it's when I see these colors that you have, I kind of fit into a little bit of sort of all of them. But one thing I've always thought about learning, and because I love learning, it's the reason to be alive as far as I'm concerned. That, and then putting out what you've learned to other people. And that's almost a story in itself. But I find that when people have a problem, it's really not so much that they're butting heads, but they're kind of defending their belief system, the knowledge that they have, they think needs defending. And I try to explain to people when I used to work at Kennesaw Mountain, talking about the battle there and that type of thing, was that I explained to people that you're not going to lose what you know if you add to it. You're going to have more. And to me, that it's a case of if you realize you're not losing by asking questions even of your own thought process, you're only going to either find out that what you knew was correct, or you're going to find out that it wasn't correct and you've added to it, and you're going to learn more. You can't lose either way. You either find out what was right or you find out something that's better. And also in the construction business that I was in, when you're building a house, you can't stop. You have to find some way to do something. When a problem comes up, you find a solution. And that's one of the things where if you realize that complaining, it's okay, but you let off a little steam, but you're not getting anything fixed. So you got to come up with a solution when you have a deadline. You got to look towards the solution. And the more knowledge you have, the more solutions you can come up with. It's vocabulary for the brain. The more knowledge you have, the more ways you can look at things, different perspectives.
Thank you.
I love what you're doing here. This is, I'd like to see that. I wish you were the head of the school system.
No, you don't. Thank you for your comments. You brought out something that I'll just kind of chase a little rabbit. I mentioned this earlier where I was raised with that thought that you continuously learn. And we were also raised to find solutions. I remember I had a very good friend who lived, and I forget the name of it, but there's a place in Chattanooga for kids whose parents are incarcerated and they can't take care of them. And I'm so embarrassed that I can't think of the name of it. But
Bethel,
several,
Bethel,
what was it?
Bethel.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. And she became a dear friend. And I remember coming home, I was a very sensitive person, that's my blue, crying because we were about to graduate high school and she didn't have money to buy invitations, to buy the announcements, the little cards, all the things. And I remember coming home and sharing this with my mom, and she said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I'm not sure. And she said, well, don't you have, because we had a big family. And she said, didn't you order more than you needed? I said, yes. And I said, what do you think about us going to the local printer and having cards made up with her name? And I'm still emotional about it because what it did was she didn't rush in to rescue. She also did provide a framework to help with the solution. And that was a great thing that both of my parents did in our growing up. And what I will say very frankly is I am observing, not everyone, I will never blanket generations. I don't think that's fair. I will never blanket groups of people. But what I have observed in younger groups right now is the inability to figure it out, the inability to see an issue, create a plan, and execute that plan. I'm coaching a few young people right now, and that is where we're drilling in. Brilliant ideas, brilliant education, great people. But when we talk about the execution and developing the plan and executing, there's a gap there. So I love what you're saying because these are things, again, if you're like, man, Knowles, I know this stuff. I respect that. I respect this group so much. What I would offer is, can you use some of these things that you know, add to your toolbox, like it was mentioned, and then help someone else who maybe is younger than you? Not everyone grew up with that continuous learning mindset. One more example, I have a client right now who is in Illinois. She was a referral from someone who did her resume. She has her master's degree. She comes from a background where her father was imprisoned. So she didn't grow up great. When the graduation came around for her MBA, her mother said to her, I have to go to a third one of these? Can you imagine what an accomplishment for this woman? And that is what she heard. Now, I'm so in admiration, one, that she said, I need a coach. I need someone to help get me out of this imposter syndrome, to help move me forward. And I love that that drive is within her. It is within her to drive to continuously improve. She just needs the help. She just needs the how. And that is where a lot of times we can come in and be an asset because we know those pieces. Not everyone grew up with that. So thanks for your comment. I really appreciate that. When you think about...
Say one more thing. One thing, because again, I'm always looking for solutions. I'm a problem solver. In doing museum displays and how most museums are done, they're kind of boring. They have a hard time getting people to come in. But I say, you got to turn it into showbiz. When I do traveling exhibits, you got to make it exciting. And if young people can realize that it is fun to solve these problems, without trying to find an app to do it, that it's very exciting. It can be fun. It's almost becomes a sport.
Mm-hmm. The failure thing's a big one. The failure thing's a big one because they've never been, again, I'm not blanket generalizing, but so many have never been allowed to fall. They've always had somebody swoop up and help prevent that failure. And so we could go here for days, right? Thinking about setting your goals. Yeah. If you're a red or you're working with a red, factual, bottom line it. I have heard myself say so many times, give me the bottom line. You hear this a lot from senior executives. When I work with legal assistants at the firm, not everyone, but I remind them, listen, you're dealing with a partner who's billing out at $500, $600, $700 an hour. Give them the bottom line. I hate to say it, and I'd say it in the kindest, most respectful way. It depends on the person and our relationship. It's not that they don't care. But you've got to bottom line it for them. They don't need to know that your car was slow today. Bottom line what you can do and be factual. They want autonomy. They want to know that end result. Setting goals, again, with a blue, they want a fixed plan. They've got to watch their overanalyzing. A blue can paralyze themselves from perfectionism and overanalyzing. And then that criticism. A blue is their own self-critic, terrible. Also, a blue under stress can manifest criticism to others. Whites, again, this setting goals, give it introspective, keep it friendly. I like to use the term soft stretches. Remember, a white wants to feel good. So if a white is finding themselves with that cognitive dissonance, they hate it. They're going to do everything they can to get back to steady state. So I toss out the process soft stretches. And avoiding pressure and making it non-threatening. A yellow, keep it low maintenance. Don't give them a workbook. They're going to be like, what workbook? Workbook where? Was that what was in the backseat of my car 10 weeks ago? Give it low maintenance, fun, on the fly. Watch asking for too much commitment too soon. They've got to enjoy the process. By the way, if you're in sales, these are great tips for your sales process, because there are some people that are going to be like, give me the bottom line, bam, 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 this works, let's go, move on, give me the contract, I'll sign it. A white, they want to just get back to steady state. Blue is going to wear you out with questions and details and the what ifs. And a yellow, am I looking good? Does this make me look good? Let's go. And I've really briefed out that for those of you who are solid long-term salespeople, don't beat me up. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of how this can be incredibly relatable for sales as well. As you look to these pieces, again, it's that setting goals and how then do you achieve your goals. We all probably set goals. What do we do to get to that finish line? What do we do to achieve our goals? So red, they like small steps. They want to see results. I'll give you an example. Last year, my husband and I took a trip of a lifetime. We did a Viking cruise. I watched way too much PBS and I wanted a Viking cruise. And so we were planning on we went to Italy on a Viking cruise. It was amazing. And I also knew that, quite frankly, my weight, and it still isn't, COVID has been a lovely friend, but I knew that I wanted to lose some weight. And there is an app. Somebody mentioned apps. Don't be mad at me. I used an app. But there is an app called Carb Manager. And this app, you basically just count your carbs. You put your food in, it tells you your carbs, you set a goal. And here's what worked for me about Carb Manager. It gave me projections. So if I put the data in, I could look at the projection and it would tell me, you stay on this track, you're going to be at this weight by this day, and you're going to be at this weight by this day. It worked. It worked for me. For someone else, it wouldn't work. That gave me a very logical process, easy to do, end results were there. A blue has got to have community. So many times when I've walked and talked to people throughout the season that we've been in, this is where they're struggling. They're in isolation. They are home. They're not in those communities that they're used to. I talked to someone the other day, and they need to be in their yoga class with the people in the class. The yoga virtual is a struggle for them because they don't have that energy and that community of people. They don't want to let anyone down. They are some of your most loyal people, and they don't want to let people down. So if you're setting goals for a blue, or you're a blue, this is important. Notice the words at the bottom. Reds need a logical, blue's got to have some emotion. There needs to be some emotion, that connection in there. A white, I know I say this ad nauseum, don't disturb their peace. Can they achieve their goals without being constantly in that cognitive dissonance? Don't give too much too soon, and they work at their own pace. I will tell you, when a white has a goal and they're serious about that goal, it will be accomplished, flat out, done. You don't have to come after them constantly. You don't have to constantly ask. If they have that goal, they know what they're doing, it will be accomplished. And then finally, a yellow. I put no low maintenance in there. It's so key for a yellow. Easy instructions. This was mentioned earlier. I appreciate you bringing this out. Some people do need that game-like. They do need that fun process. And looking good. A yellow likes to look good. Thoughts, comments, questions?
I've just got to say, Kelly, that this continues to be packed with things that tools, you're giving us tools we can all use, because we've all, I think, found ourselves in a situation where we knew we weren't connecting. And maybe we were thinking we were talking to a red, but we were talking to a yellow.
Yeah. I wish I had this, very frankly, when I was raising my youngest stepdaughter. She was 6 when we met. She was 8 when my husband and I married, and she lived with us full time. Now, there was all this blended family, and I will not wear you all out with any of that. It was complex, and I would have loved to have had this, particularly when she was in high school. She was a very compliant child. She was a very quiet, shy child. And she was a pleaser. And when she started coming into her own personality and a little bit into her own in high school, I took my red personality. It was not a good approach, because what I did is I drove her away. She would come home with straight A's. And the high school where she went, public school, I knew was not challenging their students. It's a very poor high school. They do more of, can we feed this kid and make sure that they learn English? And she was not being challenged. Now, my beautiful husband, who was a white personality, could still say, I'm proud of you. I appreciate the work you're doing. Ugly Kelly said, they're not challenging you. You're not ready for college. We've got to do this, this, and this. We need to get you on this reading program. We need to do, you see where I'm going here. That was not, character counts, first of all. I'm not proud of it. But secondly, that wasn't the right approach for her. And if you've ever coached kids, you know, there is that kid on the ball field. You can get in their face. You can say, that was the worst, whatever, the worst pitch, the worst catch, the worst run I've ever seen. What were you thinking? And some kids are going to respond to that and go, oh yeah, it's on. I'll show you. Other kids, you have just devastated them. So we're still even as adults, we still have emotions, we still have feelings, we still react in different ways. That's why I asked the question at the beginning, how do you react honestly when you encounter someone that doesn't care about reading, that doesn't care about continually improving, that just literally doesn't care? Was it because of their early development where it wasn't encouraged and they gave up? Was it because they're all about steady state? There's all kinds of things to come into play. And again, that field of neuroplasticity is fascinating because it shows how much we can continually learn and add on to our learning. Someone said that earlier, and it's a beautiful thing. So even if you're like, I've been setting and achieving goals my entire life, I guarantee you there may be someone around you that you could mentor, that maybe these types of things could be of help. I'm just tossing that out. Last slide that I have for you all is, if you're interested in discovering your driving core motive, this is a QR code. I've tested it. I hope it works, but just in case, I've got a web address for you as well. If you hold your mobile phone open your camera app, and you point your phone at this square, this QR code, what it should do is prompt the browser on your phone to open up a page where you can put in your information, and I will send you a link to take the color code. This link is for the light version, LITE, the freebie. What I'd like to do today is I want to comp and take care of the first 10 people that do this. So the first 10 people where I get your email, what I will do is convert that to the full report. And what I mean by that is the freebie gives you, looks like a pie, and it shows you your driving core motive, your main piece of pie. We are all individuals. We all are not just one color, right? And so the full report will give you the full picture. Just like I've shared, I'm a red, but I've got a secondary blue. You can see where the logic and the emotion, you've probably seen that in my personality today. Sometimes they can come in conflict with each other. So having this as a tool for my own self-awareness has been huge, super huge. So if you say, Kelly, I'd just rather have a conversation and debrief, my email is up there. It's pretty easy to remember. It's just simply kelly@kellyknowles.net. But I wanted to, as a thank you for allowing me to present today and have this conversation, I'm going to comp the first 10 that I hear from, and I'll convert that to the entire full report so that you have all of the info. Screaming questions. I'm looking at the comment. It says, common to see a personality combination of red and white, and relationship capability in personal and business. You know, I love that question. I have seen more red and blue than red and white. The red and white are both logical. So there is that. The white is all about keeping steady state, where a red is always wanting to take action. I haven't seen too many where those are the two big chunks. Seen a lot of red and blue and a lot of blue and white. Doesn't mean that it's not there. As far as fits for jobs and those kinds of things, color code premise is that anybody can do any job. There just may be some, just like we've all discovered, that we are more suited for, that we are a better fit for than others. And it really is nice when you find your sweet spot and you find that career or job that fits with your personality. But it is important to, I think, know that whole pie, because it gives you a feeling for, well, why do I feel this way sometimes, and then other ways I'm in this way. And I've talked a lot this year with people as to, where are you when you're stressed? Because where you act when you're stressed can often be a good indicator of maybe that secondary color, because you're not living in your zone, if you will. You're going to the secondary. I hope that helps to speak to that question that was in the chat.
Kelly, if you don't need your slides anymore, why don't we stop screen share? And I think that'll bring everyone kind of a little bit closer together.
Sure.
I see Anton had a question there. Are you still on, Anton? Well, his question was, and hopefully he'll pick up, great presentation. Is it common to see personality combination of red and white? I think that's me. And what about relationship compatibility in it just moved, in a personal life and business?
Yeah.
It's emotional and logical type. What is emotional and logic type a good combination?
Thank you, Glenn. I will share a personal story. My husband and I have been married almost 17 years. I didn't marry until my mid-30s, and I was never going to get married. So if you'd ever told me that I was going to marry and then help raise children, I probably would have had an expletive in my 20s, to be quite frank. One of the things that we did when we were getting married is we did premarital counseling. We failed every test, every single test. And our pastor would just look at us and shake his head and he'd be like, do you know what you're doing? Are you sure about this? And what we discovered later, because when we did this color code, is we are called complementary opposites. You know, there's always that joke that opposites attract. Both of us, our primary color is a logic based, and then our secondary color is emotional. So obviously there have been fireworks over the years. I don't know very many couples that can be married and not have those. I'm sure they're there. But that it's kind of interesting how if you've got mutual respect, then it can be a great combination. One of my bosses at the law firm is a blue, and she's amazing. She has phenomenal character. Because we have mutual respect, she and I can disagree. We can come at things from different angles, and it doesn't become a bad thing. As a matter of fact, we kind of toss ideas off of each other because the perspectives would be different. And she can toss something at me, and I can kind of toss back what I think. And I have found that she's a phenomenal resource when it comes to relationship management, because my red just wants to go and do and get it done. And she's good at sitting back and going, wait a minute, do we need to build some consensus here? Do we need to look even more at that other person's approach, that other person's why? So I think those emotional, logical combinations, especially when there's respect and character, can be incredibly powerful.
Anyone else have a question for Kelly?
I have a comment. Kelly, when I was first becoming a professional businesswoman, I look back as you were describing things, and I was clearly a blue, and I wore my feelings on my sleeve. And as you were describing it, I realized that I chose to go more red because it was too difficult and not particularly effective to have my feelings on my sleeve. And so I chose that path to be more direct, more, because way back in my day, it was very much a man's world in the business world. And so I needed to be more frank and direct and whatever. And I was just curious, do you find that people actually make choices to go in these different directions?
Thank you for saying that. So I was raised by a Midwestern mom who is very direct, and she is not a Southern belle, okay? And it's always cracks me up when people go, well, Kelly, you're just a Southern belle. And I'm like, really? No. But, you know, so she was very frank and very blunt and taught us to be that way. We were unusual in our home where we were allowed to speak our mind. Now, we weren't allowed to be brats, but we were allowed to speak our mind. I did not grow up saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. I learned that in the school system. If I was going to survive in the South, I better learn my ma'ams and sirs. But it wasn't something that was expected at our home. And so I approached the business world the same way. My father was a blue-collar electrician at a nuclear plant, and he would come home and he would sit around the table and he would use all kinds of language and talk about what he told that old SOB about this and that. And I thought that's the way you talked at work. And I, as you can imagine, I got a real rude awakening when I went into the corporate world. So I had to learn how to flip the other way. I had to learn how to soften my approach. And I still have to do that because my authentic, natural approach is from a red. And I also, having that secondary blue, I'm very sensitive. So I have to be very cognizant of both of those pieces. It has served me when I'm being smart because it's allowed me to have intuition and some empathy, especially in training adults, Adults often manifest a fear of something with anger. So if someone's coming into the training room or they're coming into the classroom and they're really, really angry and belligerent and just ready to fight the world, what I've discovered is there is an incredible amount of fear, because here they are as a professional and now they've chosen to go back to college and they're very scared. It's that beginner's mindset, or they're having to learn a new trait and they may not be able to look as polished and competent as they would prefer. I hope that helps kind of think through some of that, Marcia, but I do think people adjust sometimes.
You hit on something I wish you'd elaborate on, the fear issue. Could you kind of go through how the different colors deal with fear?
Ooh, great question. So one of the things that I'll toss into that some stress. So with a red, there's often, now again, I'm doing blanket statements here. They're going to fight. They're just going to come back at you. You come at them, they're going to come right back at you. My second job out of college, I was working at the Chamber of Commerce. I was working for the Vice President of Economic Development. So you can imagine we were dealing with very high-end, very polished people. And the woman that ran the mailroom yelled at me. And what did Kelly do? Kelly went right natural and turned around and right in the middle of the hall yelled right back. And then I found myself in the vice president's office. Now, he was probably a good 40 years older than me. He had lived, he knew what to do with me, and he coached me. He could have fired me on the spot, but he chose to coach me and teach me. And I'm so thankful for that. And if you think about a blue, when a blue is under stress or fear, they will often go inward. They will analyze. Now, I will never pretend to be a licensed counselor or have that background. These are just the things that I've experienced and learned about. But they will go to a place of analysis paralysis. They almost cannot act because they are so overwhelmed. I really feel like people who have a lot of blue during the season we've been in, they are really struggling because they don't have that community and connection. And then the fear, I talked to someone the other day who bought 1,000 masks, 1,000. And I was like, oh, wow. And I thought I have two. And everybody's got a different opinion on all that. And I don't want to be political, but they're prepping. You know, there may be generators bought and food supplies, and this person has convinced me that I'm not going to be able to function because I don't have a battery backup on my router. It's actually on my list now. I need a battery backup for my router. So a white is often going to really shut down and just really go inward, because fear means a white doesn't have that steady state. There's also a lot of anger that I've noticed with people who are white and they're in a place of fear. And then a yellow, they just kind of get goofy sometimes, and that's a terrible way to put it, but they sometimes will just act out. I'll use my grandson as an example. When I used to take them to the doctor when they were little, I didn't know what to do with his behavior. I mean, he was out of control. He was not a rambunctious child. He was a very active child, but he was very he was well behaved. And we'd get to the doctor's office and he'd be all over the place. Well, what he wasn't willing to say is, I'm scared. And so instead, he would aggravate his big brother to death, who was fine. He was perfectly fine. He would pick, he would grab things, he would just, and I finally dawned on me that if I just explained what was happening, okay, we're going to go to the doctor today. Today is just a checkup. These are the things that the doctor's going to do. I expect you to sit here. When we get into the waiting room, I expect you to do this. We have these toys for you to play with, blah, blah, blah. When I gave him some semblance of structure and security, his behavior changed. With the job, my husband was always home earlier, so he almost did all the dentist visits when the boys lived with us. And once I learned this, I said, remember when you get to the dentist, he's going to act insane. I said, tell him what you're doing. Tell him the process, give him the lay of the land. It was a game changer. And so I hope that helps speak to it, because I think this is something that if you're a Facebook user, I have no science nor art behind this. So for those of you who are purists, please forgive me. But I will look at somebody's Facebook posts and try to pick their color based on what they're posting, especially if it's a lot of politics or it's very incendiary. Sometimes people feel like they have no voice, and Facebook is the only place they feel like they have a voice. I actually had a conversation with a white on that one day where we really dug down, and they said, this is the only place where I feel like I have a voice, even if it's not effective. And I thought, wow, this is so insightful. So that's please forgive me, Molly, because I know you're a professional in all of these things. That's my very unscientific, tacky way of finding things out about people is I look at what are they posting, if they're friends, obviously.
Well, one of the unique things about Chattanooga Self Improvement is this is the place where everyone has a voice. With that in mind, Billy Weathers, you're mighty quiet, and you've been MIA, so glad to have you back.
Hey, thanks a lot. Yeah, good to be back. Great presentation today.
You got a question for Kelly? Have you thought about some of your most troubling clients that you've worked with over the years, and maybe began to think of were they red, yellow, or white, or whatever?
Yeah, that's a good analogy there because I've had a whole mixed bag of clients, but it's good to kind of keep that in mind and know the personalities you're dealing with and know how to deliver to them.
Sylvia Colvin, we haven't heard from you today, sweetheart. I've unmuted you. Well, no, I can't unmute you. There you go. Yeah.
I unmuted myself. I was eating breakfast, so I took myself off video, and I enjoyed the presentation. I'm sorry I was a little late. I would have enjoyed hearing more of Kelly's beginning story because I love people's stories. I'm not sure what color I am, but I thought that was a fascinating delineation of types. And I also like to read people and figure out what their drivers are. And I used to do this when our kids were in high school, Glenn, they would bring me a yearbook and show me a picture of a person. And I would study that person's face, and I would try to tell some things about it. And they were amazed because I could read so much from just looking at somebody's face. So I don't know, I guess I must be a blue, but I've enjoyed this whole conversation. I'll have to email Kelly to get her other link because I was having to use my phone for Zoom this morning and I couldn't get the code. So yeah, thank you for getting these great speakers, Glenn. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for volunteering. Anyone else? We've got about 4 minutes left. Anyone got a Aram, I see you. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kelly, I don't know if you're aware of Strength Finders.
Yes.
So I've taken that, and my number one characteristic is learning. So I'm always learning or trying to learn something new. But I've never done this color personality test. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Very cool. I'm teaching a management class for MTSU right now, and StrengthsFinder is part of it. I took it about 10 years ago, but I'm going to retake it. That is one of the things with a lot of the personality profiles, whether it's DISC and some of the others, is if you have a lot of change in your life, it will change. I've seen this myself with the DISC. We did DISC for our HR group several years ago. And then a few years later, we did it again. It was very interesting to see the change because who had to step up and be a leader and those types of things. I was the only D, the dominant, when we did it the first time. And then a few years later, because leadership had changed and there wasn't a strong leader for the group at that time, several people had kind of adapted. This goes back to Marcia's question, had kind of adapted into the D. I have not taken my DISC recently, but I'd be eager to see where I am now. But one of the things that I loved about color code is that your driving core motive, the premise is that does not change. We can all adapt. We can all be changed. If you're a person of faith like I am, I know the power of a change.
Right.
But the reason, and let me just pause real quick. I should have said this earlier. When you go to take this, for those of you that are choosing to do that, there is something that some people have struggled with. So I want to be very transparent. It asks you questions about what you were like when you were a kid. And it took my mother 3 years to get through this. I mean, she just couldn't handle it. And the reason is that it wants to kind of know that innate personality. I kind of joke, it's who you were before you learned how to get along well with others. And so when you take this, for those of you that maybe didn't have a very good childhood or maybe had to grow up quickly, I have a good friend that she calls herself a military brat. Her father was an officer in I believe it was the Air Force, so they traveled all over, and she was constantly having to adapt to new schools. And it was difficult for her at the beginning to kind of flesh through the color code because of that constant adapting she had to do as a kid. She really had to kind of go back and look at, well, who am I really at my core? So that is something that makes color code a little bit different, in that it wants to know that core of who you are. Not that you didn't learn how to adapt, as Marcia mentioned, and do other things, but what's your natural bent? What's your core bent? StrengthsFinder, I'm eager to take it again, Aram, with this class that I'm teaching, just to see if there's been any changes in the last 10 years.
Folks, our time is up. It is precisely 9:30. I was hoping Anton would unmute and invite everyone to his marketing clinic, which will be held this coming Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. So if you're doing some of your own marketing or maybe wanting to analyze marketing in your business, I suggest you jump on Anton's Chattanooga Marketing Clinic. You can just Google Chattanooga Marketing Clinic. It's free, and I promise it's packed with value. Miss Marcia helps him lead it. You want to quickly say anything else about it, Marcia?
I just think that it's been really interesting during this time of having to Zoom, how we have kind of gotten underneath the marketing issue in a more personal way than we did before. And in a way, kind of like we do on Tuesday morning, just with a different focus.
It is. So, folks, I love you. I care for each and every one of you. I'm sorry our time's gone. Kelly, you absolutely hit a home run with the bases loaded today. We had the greatest participation in this event of any we have had this year. And as you know, we've had people on that have national recognition, but they didn't draw the crowd you did. And I've taken about 4 pages of notes. I look forward to reviewing the replay. And yes, I will edit it and post it. And I still have almost finished the one with Dean Wergner from Authentically American. I'll try to get that up in the next few days. It's just my life is I am multi-color coded right now with all that's going on. So, Joe Wheelis, I'm so sorry we didn't get to interact with you. Thanks you for being with us. Joe was one of our first members of the group. Showed up the first day down at Whole Foods almost 5 years ago. I love you. And remember, folks, your day will be just as good as you visualize it. If you want to stick around when I end it, we can kind of have a backstage version for those that want to stay around.